Hi, I'm Brienne. Welcome back to my channel. And today's video is about encouragement and just having a chat with you, but it's still going to be very helpful for those of you who are creative. When I first began in film school, one of the very first things that my professor said to me and to my class as a whole was that we had an opportunity to be something different in the industry. So they gave us a statistic which said that most screenwriters were aged 35 and over, white men. And that's fine, whatever that's them. However, he wanted us to understand that that allowed for a unique opportunity for diverse voices, for diverse experiences, and for diverse points of view. And that was one of the things that they taught us because at the time, I think I may have been 19 or 20 in film school, and he was just trying to get us to understand this next point that I'm going to make. The next thing that he said was, you need to live your life. And what he said was that sometimes when you look at movies and they seem very one-sided, or it just seems like the same old story, the same old outcome, it's because the people who wrote them have one singular opinion of life. And sometimes it's because it doesn't differ or consider the experiences of others. And with that said, he encouraged us to live. So, in order to be a great writer, number one, you need to be okay with your individual voice. And then the second thing that you need to do is live. If you spend all day holed up watching movies of what other people did, but also just trying to be adjacent to their thoughts and their opinions, then you're not going to make good film. Also, the way that resonates as an actress or an actor is that if you don't live, if you don't talk to people, if you don't learn things, if you don't read good books, if you don't go out and learn skills, then what are you going to be able to bring when it comes to being an actor? You know, it's easy to be the pretty girl. It's easy to be the handsome guy. It's easy to be the athlete if you were already athletic. But bringing true emotion, true physical authenticity to a character requires you to, number one, have an understanding of different personalities, different people, different experiences, different takes, having empathy, understanding what's funny, understanding what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. And so that's some of the things that I want to talk to you about today. The other thing I want to talk to you about is age. So in order to have a life, in order to have life experiences, you have to get older. And so a lot of people are just so insecure about their age when it comes to the industry. But we can't always tell the story of the 17-year-old beautiful teenager. And we can't always tell the story of the 80-year-old who regrets their whole life either. We have to tell the various stories, the wins, the losses, the triumphs, the passions, the challenges. And so if you're someone today who is concerned that your age is a factor in whether or not you get parts in movies, it's time for you to really let go of that. Nowadays, there's so many great stories being told about people and so much diversity and just a desire to learn about people and to see people who look like other people your age, that there's so much work out here nowadays. And to that point, if you're a writer and actor, there's nothing stopping you from creating that work, you know? But I'll tell you one experience I had when I first started acting. I remember um, I was graduating high school and I decided to call one of those companies that is supposed to like train you to be a model and an actress because I was just getting my start and I thought maybe I should, call the phone number on this commercial. And so I called the number, and when I called, I said, "Hi, I wanted some help with taking acting classes and learning how to become an actress." And the guy said, "Well, how old are you?" And I said, "I'm 18." His response was, "Honey, why did you wait so long?" And I was like, "Huh?" Like, he was like, why did you wait? You wasted so much time. And I was a little thrown back. My response wasn't to feel bad, but my response was because I was still in high school. I wasn't old enough to get out here and do all this stuff. And he was like, oh, I don't know if I can work with you because you started so late. There may not be anything left. And from that moment, I decided that that wasn't the right agency or company for me to work with, because what could I do as a 16, 17-year-old who was, consumed with trying to, pay for her prom dress, graduate from high school? I mean, there are actors, child actors, who start that young, and that's fine. However, that wasn't the case for me. I was still in high school and I was still being a kid, so there you have it. Um, but I remember that. And so the reason why I bring up that story is because I want you to be encouraged that what that person said to me wasn't true. And like I said, we need people of every age. We need people to look different looks, different skin colors, different hair colors, different heights, different weights, um, different skill sets to be successful in film. Film is going to get boring if we always have carbon copies of the same old stories. And nowadays, people want more authenticity. People want more variety. People don't want to just think that only one type of person is beautiful, or one body type, or one accent, or one nationality is beautiful. They want to know that you're telling a story about a human being, the human experience. And so that's the other thing I wanted to encourage you today about. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was the daunting challenge of figuring out where to start when you want to be an actor or a writer. Now, in my opinion, as someone who teaches, um, I often want to direct people to the factual aspects of acting and writing, which will lead you to places like the Writers Guild of America, or the Actors Guild, or the SAG-AFTRA. And the reason why is because I think it's very important when you want to be a writer, an actress, or a creative, that you understand what your rights are. I've been on movie sets where so many people don't know what their rights are, and they're allowed or allow people to cross boundaries that they shouldn't. Now, it doesn't mean that you're rude, it doesn't mean you're uncooperative, but it definitely means that you can't be afraid to say no to things that you probably would wish you had said no to in the future. You know, when you're a writer, especially screenwriters, they paint the picture of it just being so difficult for you to break into the industry. And there are things that you need to know, and yet there are some parts of it that can be. But again, the market is opening up. You no longer have to only be in New York or Los Angeles in order to get things done in your career. Not only that, but we have the power of social media. But before you even get out here and throw all of your creativeness out into this world, you really need to understand things like basic copyrights. You know, the basic copyright is that whatever you write, whatever you create is already protected. But then what about things like registering your scripts? You know, those are things that so many writers don't know, and they're very quick to share their ideas with people, and they think, oh, they're not going to steal, or oh, they don't have the capacity to do what I can do. But you be very wrong in assuming that. When I was in film school, one of the scariest moments was when my teacher, who was a starving artist, so to speak, he was a part-time professor, but he also was someone who was looking to sell scripts so that he could no longer be a professor, but rather be a Hollywood screenwriter. And one day I'm sitting in class with our index cards and we're writing scenarios, and we wrote some simple, simple ones, nothing too creative, just basic stuff. And he read them, and then as he looked over him, he said, no, you need more. Give me more. Build the character. And we began to do that. And I looked around and I saw that he was taking some of them and saying, okay, um, I'm going to keep these. But then I also overheard him later in the week talk about how he was going to go to Los Angeles. And I began to think about that, and I should go back to that first day. The first day with the index cards, I began to give generic things instead of what my actual ideas were, because I was very suspicious of why he was pushing us so hard. But fast forward to later in the week, I hear that he's going to Los Angeles and he's talking a lot about pitching. Well, I decided that I would no longer share my ideas and my original dialogue and etc. with him, because I had the feeling that perhaps he was going to use what we were creating in our class with the people who he was going to see in Los Angeles. Now, I don't know if that was actually what he did, but I can tell you that years later, and actually I heard some things before then, but I will say that years later, while I was on the street, I happened to see one of my film school classmates, and they told me the story of how some of the teachers or professors actually indeed did go to Los Angeles, and they did pitch the ideas that the students were writing, and some of them stuck. So do I know those people? No. Do I know what the work was? No. But what I do know is that knowing your rights, knowing how to protect yourself, even when you're pitching ideas to people, even when you're having meetings with people to talk about your work. Do you know about non-disclosure agreements? Do you know about buying options? Well, options, I should say. Options, meaning that they're able to hold your script for a certain amount of time before they produce it. Do you know how to protect yourself and what's actually protected when your work is registered with the Writers Guild of America? There's also one for playwright, for dramaturgs and for playwrights to protect their work and to understand. Do you know the proper format of how to write a script? Do you know that if you're a student, you can get a discount for software when it comes to screenwriting and playwriting, etc.? These are things that can be a little bit overwhelming for artists. And so what I'm hoping to achieve with my channel, and not just hoping, but what I know will achieve with my channel, is I'm making the access and the resources the access to the resources available for you. Now, I'm not going to be able to hold your hand for every single detail, and for that reason, that's why I often direct people when they talk with me about these things to the agencies that can provide things like legal help, agencies that can show you what a basic contract looks like, agencies that can tell you what your rights are, even as far as like when you're an actress or an actor. How do you go about intimacy scenes? How do you say, how do you stand up for yourself when they want you to do things that you didn't sign up for originally in your contract? Your rights as a writer to rewrites, to be on set when your work is produced. Those are things that you have to learn. So I've actually said a lot with that. So as we go through my channel, I'm not trying to give you all the information today in this one video, but what I'm hoping is that I encourage you to stick around and to see the value in subscribing and just learning more, because what I want is for you to not only be professional but be prepared and protected as you go about your career. The next thing that I want to talk about is the question of, do you need acting classes in order to be a successful actress or actor? And the truth is yes and no. Now, if you are someone at the very beginning of your career, and even at the very beginning of your financial ability, you may not be able to take actual acting classes, meaning a physical class where you go in and you pay, let's say, $200 to have a lesson, and that's fine. There are actually a lot of people who start their careers never having a acting class, but it is true that at a certain point, depending on the level you get, you do have to become more and more familiar with things. And it's not so much that you have to take full out classes, but for instance, let's say you're an American and you've been playing American parts and they've come easy to you, but then one day that big role comes and all of a sudden sorry about the noise. All of a sudden, they want you to have a British accent and be a sword fighter. Okay, so that's going to take some classes. So my answer to that is, if you're a very beginner, if you've never had any acting experience, but you know that this is something that you want to do, don't fret about overspending on acting classes. Some of the three of the things you can actually do are: number one, you can look up what the great movies are, and you can study what those actors do. You know, don't just follow along the story, but watch the movies technically. For instance, when I was in school, film school, one of the movies that we watched were The Graduate with Dustin Hoffman. Great movie. We watched it for the storytelling, but it's also great to watch with the acting. And so what you do is you find the great movies. You can even go to like the list of all of the Oscar winning movies over the years. Watch those movies and just watch what those actors do. Pick up little things. Watch how authentic they are. Think about the character that they're playing and look at the nuances of how they move their bodies, how they move their faces, how they dress, how they walk. Those are things that you need to develop as an actor or an actress. The second thing you can do is you can begin to look for monologues. And believe it or not, there are so many free websites that are dedicated to finding monologues. So you can just simply look up monologues, and what you want to do is read. Just read. Look at where the periods and the commas and the exclamation points are. Practice different ways that you would say those lines or those stanzas of poems or whatever it is that you read. Just try different ways. And then the third thing that I would do if I wanted to be an actress and I was at the very beginning, or an actor, is I would just become more familiar with the industry. You can look on websites such as Backstage, and you can read articles. You know, like I said, there's always improvement for skills. Even singers who sing fantastically, once they get a certain amount of success, they begin to hire other industry professionals that can help them to grow into their craft. And so, yeah, you don't have to have it all together in the very beginning. What you want to do is be familiar, be respectful, and be professional. Sometimes less is more, and it's the truth. Sometimes you don't have to be the loudest one in the room. Sometimes you just need to be calm. You need to be professional. You need to be respectful of the professionals' time that agree to work with you. You need to be respectful of what their expectations are of you. And you also need to be respectful of yourself and how you present yourself. And that really truly are some of the very basic keys to becoming an actor. And from there, you can grow. You can grow into what you want to be. And so today, if I leave you with anything, I want you to just not only join me on this channel, but I also want you to use the resources that I tell you about. One of the resources, which is actually it's a free resource, I'm sorry. It's in a description of my channel. It's a description of what makes a good headshot. And that's a free resource that you can start with, because you do need a headshot. Now, again, the explanation of what makes a good headshot is that in that free PDF download that I provide. But also, it doesn't take a whole lot of money. I show you ways to do this thing without costing an arm and a leg. So there you have it. Subscribe to my channel, download the PDF, and let's begin to build the blocks of a successful creative career, whether you're a writer or an actor. So have a great day, and tomorrow's April 1st, so I'll see you soon. Bye.